Well, motoring lawyer Nick Freeman, also known as Mr. Loophole, told me earlier that it wasn't necessarily a new offence.
That's absolutely correct. The law has been for a long time endorsable with 3 penalty points if you go along a motorway lane that's closed and painted by way of a red cross on the gantry. But what's happened is the police haven't had the appropriate equipment to enforce that law. People, I don't think, have been aware of the fact that they haven't had it, and in any case, people haven't been prosecuted for it. So what they're really saying now is they're presenting it as a change in the law. It isn't a change in the law. It's simply a case that we will now enforce the existing law.
And what's your reaction to this enforcement?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I can't see there's any point in having laws like that unless they're going to be enforced. I think that the Highways Authority need to make sure that they actually advise motorists in advance how far the lane is that's going to be closed. So when you see a cross on a gantry, you can't go across it, but you need advance warning, particularly when the motorways are congested, so that you can get out of that lane. So we need information, and it needs to be accurate information that in a mile or half a mile, repeat information, there is a lane closed, so that when people see the red cross, they know, and they've been preparing, they've got to get out of that lane and they'll be in another lane. And it's also important to bear in mind that although the offence of going through the cross carries 3 penalty points, if you drive, you undertake, invariably there'd be inside lane, the near side lane, and you suddenly pull across someone at the last moment, you could be prosecuted for something more serious. For example, driving without due care and attention, which carries a much wider range of points, 3 to 9 penalty points, and a discretionary ban. And in certain circumstances, if you were to pull across and cause an accident, you could be charged with dangerous driving. So, yes, it's good to enforce the law. People need to be cognizant that when they say a lane's closed, it's closed, and the Highways Authority need to give the motorists advance warning, and that we need to comply with the law as it currently stands.
I know a recent poll found that a quarter of drivers had ignored the red signs and had to swerve out of the closed lane at the last minute. So, this can't be safe, can it?
That is appalling driving, and it's shocking to hear that statistic. I suspect that probably quite a lot of those people don't even know what that red sign means, which is quite frightening. And maybe the gantry information should, to help people who aren't very savvy with the highway code, and these are fairly fundamental points, aren't they? A red cross should ring alarm bells at people, and they should realise quite readily we're not to go in that lane. So yes, it's dangerous, and maybe to help those who are unfamiliar with the highway code, there should be some information just advising people what certain signs mean. It might be quite helpful to motorists, certainly the most significant signs.
And is it ignorance, do you think? Is that why these lane closure signs are being ignored?
I think there's a combination of things. I think that there's ignorance as to what the law is. I think there's the fact that people may know that they actually can go through, and it's not going to be enforced because the technology hasn't been there. So if you have law and you know you're not going to be punished for it, people are tempted to thwart the law irrespective. And there may be other reasons why people go through it, but it is incredibly dangerous because in the vast majority of cases, the lanes are closed for a good reason. That there's normally a breakdown, and normally pedestrians and other people in a live lane, and it's very, very dangerous to drive in a line lane with pedestrians walking about. So the closure is there for good reason, but there needs to be trust, and I think the motorist is provided by the Highways Authority, I regret to say, with an awful lot of false information, a lot of inaccurate information. You often find, for example, a lane's closed and you arrive there and there's just nothing. And, of course, the respect and trust then breaks down, and people then think, well, they say it's closed, but I don't actually believe them. So it's a two-way process, and I'm sure if everyone cooperates sensibly, it will work well, and for the people who don't, they deserve to be punished.
The aim of the Smart Motorway project is to increase capacity and relieve congestion, make a journey more reliable. In your opinion, is that happening, or is this a fundamental flaw?
In my opinion, smart motorways are anything other than smart. This is my opinion. I think the lack of an emergency lane for a breakdown is really horrendous. I know they're trying to rectify that by building lay-bys now at fairly close quarters. I think the lanes generally are far too narrow. And I think the idea that the constantly changing speed is not helpful, because it's ensuring that motorists are totally obsessed with how fast they're going, as opposed to what is going on around them. And, travelling within the speed limit is one aspect of driving safely, but you need spatial awareness. You need to be aware what's behind you, what's in front of you, what's alongside you, everything that's going on. And because you see a sign and you look at the speed, you look down at your speedometer, you're obviously doing a lot of things very quickly. But it's constantly changing, and it appears that the judgment and trust of the motorist has been stolen. We have what I call nanny roads now, because the motorist isn't trusted to drive on them sensibly and properly, which I think is unfortunate. And the information, as I've said previously, that we get in terms of the speed is slowed down from 70, which is really very slow on a motorway, to 50 and 40, and you're going along at this speed. That causes congestion in itself. And you're scratching your head thinking, why have they reduced the speed limit? There's nothing that's actually happening to justify that. And to me, it's nonsensical. It causes actually more congestion and more frustration with the motorists. And also the difficulty now is you can't escape, you can't get away. So because the speed limits are so regulated and so constantly changing, you need to establish some space with other vehicles. And you can't sort of, right, I'm going to put my foot down and get out of the way because you're concerned about the cameras, etc. So you're all bunched up together. There's a lack of freedom. I don't like them at all.
And finally, do you think, Nick, things will improve after this new Home Office legislation is introduced on the 10th of June? In
terms of compliance with the gantry signal not to enter a closed lane, I think things will definitely, absolutely, they will of course improve. I think the vast majority of people will realise that a closed lane means exactly what it says, and why would they want to incur 3 penalty points at least on their driving licence? So they'll be ill-advised to thwart it, because they will be prosecuted.
That's motoring lawyer Nick Freeman speaking.